Hi everyone, Janie here. Welcome back to my garden. Welcome back to my December very cold garden. We've had such a cold fall season here in Northern California. It's been kind of nice because we had a really hot summer and now we're having a really cold winter and it's just kind of a nice break. So anyway, happy December. We are officially in December now, and for my first video in December, I wanted to go over 10 things that I'm going to be doing in my December garden and that you can do in your December garden. So if you all don't know, I live in Northern California, zone 9B. We don't really get freezes here. Maybe we'll get one or two a year. Knock on wood, we're probably going to get a ton this year now that I said that, but our ground never freezes. So we can basically garden all year round. So this video isn't, some of the things are for those of you who get snow, but a lot of it is for those of you who are kind of like me and your ground doesn't freeze and the ground can still be worked. For those of you whose ground does freeze, don't worry, I have a couple things for you all to do in your December garden as well. So the first thing I have on my December gardening to-do list is to plant cool season veggies and to sow some cool flowers. So for the cool season veggies, I'm going to be really focusing on lettuces, cool winter lettuces. I think I'm going to sow some peas as well. I've already sown my carrots. They are germinating and coming up and I'll have to thin those. But if you can still work your soil, it's a great time to be working on your winter veggie garden. Now I have a planting calendar that I actually got from my local garden center, Green Acres, and that's the planting calendar that I like to use. There's a whole bunch of them. You just need to find your local planting calendar, what you can direct sow at this time each month, and then what you need to transplant each month. And for those of you in cooler weathers, you're obviously going to have more breaks than we're going to have, unless you want to do greenhouse growing, which could be really fun. I do have some tomatoes growing, germinating, and the little seedlings are up, and I am going to be planting tomatoes in my greenhouse this winter, which is really exciting. So the exact opposite of winter veggies, but I'm still playing around and I'm still having fun with it. As for my cut flower garden, I have a couple more things that I need to do in December. Back in 2020, which is the first year that I was like super obsessed with my cut flower garden, I had the best, most beautiful cut flower garden, and it wasn't even in a really big area. It was a 10-foot by 20-foot area. And that year I had such a fantastic cut flower garden, and I was going through and doing some digital organizing, and I found my seed sowing schedule for 2020. And so that's what I'm going to be using this year is my 2020 seed sowing schedule. And for that, the first week of December, I need to sow my foxgloves, my digitalis. And then the last week of December, I need to sow my snapdragons, echinacea, and dusty miller. So those are some seed sowing that I'm going to be doing for my cut flower garden in December. All right, next thing that I'm going to be doing in my December garden, and you all can do in your December garden as well, is transplanting your dormant trees and shrubs. So what you want to do, the best time to transplant a tree or a shrub or even a perennial is after leaf drop, but before bud break. So basically the act of dropping a plant's leaves actually takes a ton of energy for plants. And so if you transplant a plant right before they go through that process, it's going to be really stressful for them because they're going to be taking all their energy and they're going to be putting it towards the leaf drop or the bud break. So what you want to do is you want to time your transplants correctly, and you want to do it after it's dropped all its leaves, or basically when it's dormant. Then once it's dormant, it can take all its energy and put it towards root growth, as opposed to leaf drop, bud break, making flower, creating flowers, taking care of foliage or anything like that. So transplanting during dormancy is perfect. Most of our plants lose their leaves in late November, early December. So if I have anything I need to transplant, I will be doing it this month. The next thing I'm going to be doing in my December garden, which we all can do, is feed the birds. Fill up those bird feeders, make sure that they're all cleaned out and they don't have any diseases hanging around, and give those birds some fresh bird seed. They conducted some studies at the University of Wisconsin, and they found that birds had a significant higher survival rate that had access to bird feeders as opposed to the ones that didn't. So it definitely helps those birds. It's something that you don't need to do all year because during the summer, there's lots of insects that the birds can get to feed their young and to eat themselves. But during the winter time, it gets a lot harder for them to find food for themselves. So I am definitely going to be hanging up my bird feeders this month, cleaning them out first, then filling them up with some really good bird seed. So feeding the birds is something that I'm definitely going to be doing in my garden because I want to keep birds here because they help keep the insect population down during the summer when I really need it. So the next thing I'm planning to do in my December garden here in California is I need to prune my deciduous fruit trees. I have a pomegranate that needs to be pruned. I have an apricot that needs to be pruned. And I do have a fig, but that fig luckily doesn't need to be pruned because I was able to have my arborist come by and prune it earlier this fall, which is great. So just like when you're transplanting dormant trees and shrubs, you want to think about pruning your fruit trees after leaf drop because again, the act of dropping its leaves is very, very stressful on the plants. And so you want to wait until all the leaves are off when you do something else really stressful like pruning it. The other thing I need to do is I need to start my dormant spray regimen. So dormant spray is like a copper fungicide, horticulture oil, sometimes it's called dormant oil. Basically, it is a spray that you put on your fruit trees over the winter to basically kill soft-bodied overwintering insects like aphids, whiteflies, mites, or anything like that. You also can choose specific sprays to help with funguses like peach leaf curl or shot hole fungus or even powdery mildew. It's something that if you've had the problem in the past year, you want to address it when the tree is dormant. It's the best time to address it. And sometimes, like if you're treating something like peach leaf curl, you don't want to wait till bud break because by then it's too late and the fungus is already there. So now's the time to start thinking about it, start planning your regimen. Here where I live, it's really, really easy. We have a saying that you want to spray right around Thanksgiving and right around Valentine's Day. And so that would be a 2 application regimen. Sometimes if it's really bad, you can do a 3 application regimen. But for me, it's right around Thanksgiving and right around Valentine's Day. So early in December, I'm going to be spraying my apricot tree that has dealt with aphids, and then I don't think I need to spray my pomegranate tree, but if there was any other issues, now would be the time to do it. And then I would do it again in early February around Valentine's Day. So for us in California, the rainy season is here. I always like to say I live in a very hot and dry environment, but we get rain during our rainy season, which is, I always think Halloween is the start of our rainy season, and that is when we get the majority of our rain. Basically, all of our rain is condensed into just a couple of months during the winter. So we're right in the rainy season right now, and now is a perfect time to check your irrigation and your watering. I always talk about the irrigation system that I use, and it's called Ratio. It's called a smart sprinkler system. Basically, it's on my phone, and I love it because it's so easy for me to be sitting and drinking my coffee and checking my irrigation and see how it is. And so it's really easy for me to cut back on my irrigation, or if we've had a really dry spell, add a couple days, decrease the amount of time, anything like that. So in December, it's a really, really good time to kind of check and see where you're at with the water, with how much rain we've gotten or how little rain we've gotten, and irrigate accordingly. The other good thing to do in December is to start checking your plants, maybe that you have in your greenhouse that aren't hooked up to drip irrigation, or other pots. Like I just planted a whole bunch of evergreens and we didn't hook them up to irrigation yet. And so just checking them to make sure that 1, they're getting enough water, and more importantly, 2, they're not getting too much water. You want to make sure that they're not soggy, their drain holes are not plugged up, because that's the worst thing that you can do is have a plant sit in water all winter long. Okay, now for what I consider the fun stuff, which is planting winter bloomers. So camellias, right? Camellias are Hands down, camellias are my favorite winter bloomers. They're so wonderful and they bring such a beautiful pop of color into a time when we don't have a lot of flowers going on. So Camellia sasanquas will bloom before the new year. I just planted Yuletide camellia, which is probably one of the most common and most wonderful Camellia sasanquas. And by the way, Yuletide camellia smells good. Jason and I had no idea. And then as we were planting it, we were like, oh, this smells amazing. So Camellia sasanquas and then Camellia japonicas are camellias that will bloom like in January, February, at least for us. They will bloom after the new year. There's Forsythia, which is a fabulous winter bloomer. California lilac, Ceanothus, which is a fabulous winter bloomer a little bit later in the winter. And then there's a new one, well, new to me, and it's called winter jasmine, which I am not familiar with, and now I'm obsessed with, and I want to get my hands on winter jasmine, as well as Daphne. I definitely want to get my hands on Daphne. And then, of course, there's all the winter blooming annuals, which are amazing. Cyclamen, the best, my favorite. I love it. I love cyclamen so much. It's a little expensive, and I don't know about you guys if you've noticed, it's even more expensive this year. So I'm waiting for Costco to carry cyclamen because Costco has such a good deal on cyclamen. Violas, pansies, primrose, which is so beautiful. I was just watching this old BBC show on Victorian gardening. It was really, really good. And they were talking all about primrose and primulas because those are like original European and English bloomers. So anyways, just really, really cool, fun stuff. You have to look a little bit harder to find winter bloomers, but they're there. And I just think winter bloomers are so special because that one bloom can mean so much, right? It can brighten your day just by seeing a plant just have one bloom come out for you. So it's very different than summer bloomers, but I think it's just as special. So then in contrast to planting winter bloomers, we have a not so fun job, which is control the weeds. So like I said, we are in our rainy season here, and rainy season means all those dormant weed seeds are coming to life and sprouting, and we're getting more and more weeds. And the best thing you can do with weeds is to stay on top of them. It is so important to stay on top of them and not let them go to seed, because once you let a weed set seed, you're basically setting yourself up for weeds for the next 7 years. I learned that in my Master Gardener's course. So basically, weed seeds can stay dormant in your soil for 7 years. And so if you let a weed flower, basically as soon as it flowers, you're too late, right? And as soon as it flowers, it will set seed, and you'll be dealing with those weeds for the next 7 years. Sorry, I know that's really depressing to say, but just stay on top of your weeds. Just plan it, set it in your maintenance weekly schedule, just to go out and weed your garden, even if it's a day like today and it's the last thing you want to do. It's something that's really important for your December garden. And then I feel like I say this in basically every month, what I'm doing this month, but that is to mulch and to add organic matter to your garden. I can't stress enough, coming to this new garden where there was nothing going on, adding organic matter is so important, and it has made such a giant difference in how my garden is performing. When you add organic matter to your garden, you are immediately improving the soil in so many ways. Whatever issue you have going on with your soil, whether it's super clay, whether it's super sandy, whether it doesn't have enough nutrients, whether it's too alkaline or too acidic, organic matter is going to help that. And organic matter, when I say that, I usually mean compost, some form of compost. And it's going to fix basically all those problems. It's going to neutralize the soil, help loosen up any clay soil. It's going to help the soil retain water if you have sandy soil, and on and on and on. It is just a fabulous addition. In my orchard garden, which is the very first place that I started amending the soil, I was digging the other day. What was I planting? Oh, I was planting the oak leaf hydrangeas. And I was just like, man, this soil is good. All the wood chips had gotten kind of incorporated into the compost, which had gotten incorporated into the native soil. Because what I do is I just put the compost straight on top of the native soil and I let it slowly work itself down. And as I was digging in there, I was so happy. I was so impressed. So now is a great time to do it, again, because we're in the rainy season. you put the compost on, and the rain's basically gonna help it incorporate down into the ground. Now, obviously, if you get snow, this isn't something that you're gonna be able to do in your December garden, but if you don't get snow, it's a great thing to do because of the rain and because we also have a little bit of extra time because we don't have much else going on in the garden. The last two things that I'm doing for my December garden aren't really in the garden. They're things that I can do sitting inside with a cup of coffee with a blanket on. And the first one is planning my next year's garden. If you all have watched me for a while, you know how much I love planning the garden. I love it just as much as working out in the garden. It's so much fun to dream and think about what you're going to do next year. So plan out your seed starting schedule, plan out what you're going to plant, plan out your annual's color scheme for next year. Basically plan everything out so that you're ready and you're organized once the busyness of the gardening season comes in March and April and May. I always like to remind you all that Proven Winners has a great website with something called idea boards, which is basically like Pinterest for plants, and you can go through and you can make idea boards of the plants that you want to plant into your garden, and you can separate it by garden. You can do your entire garden. You can basically organize your entire garden on the Proven Winners website, which is really, really fun. So I'll put a link to that down below. And then they also have a new program that I think is really, really interesting. It's called Easyscapes, and Walter's Gardens, which is the perennial division of Proven Winners, they started this, and it's really interesting because they basically have combined a whole bunch of plants together to go in certain gardens, whether you're focusing on pollinators, whether you're dealing with heat and humidity, whether you're dealing with shade, whatever issue you have going on, they have made a collection for you of perennials that you can plant in your garden. So check that out. It's really, really cool, and it's super helpful for planning. All right, the last thing that I'm going to be doing in my December garden, and this is kind of end of December, early January that I want you guys to think of it, but of course I want to remind you all, is that it's just about bare root season. So bare root season is usually bare root fruit trees and then also bare root roses. And I've done a video on why bare root is better. I'll link that in the description down below. But basically, for us, at least here in Northern California, late December, early January is when all the bare roots come into the garden centers and they sell out like that. So you can't go January 15th and say, oh, I think I want to get this rose or something like that. You really have to plan it and you have to think about it. So now's the time to think about which bare root roses you want to plant into your garden, which bare root fruit trees or berries that you want to plant in your garden. Bare root is better because it allows the plant to get established into its native soil wherever you plant it in, and it's going to grow so much faster and so much healthier than if you were to transplant a plant. It's not horrible to transplant a plant. I mean, the plant will survive, but if you can go bare root, not only are you going to save money, but the plant is going to be so much happier. So it's a really good thing to start thinking about your bare root plans for late December, early January, and what you want to plant, where you want to plant it. And even if you can call your local garden center and order it, then you can make sure that you can get your hands on whatever bare root you want. So I know we're super busy with the holiday season. There's so much going on, but we still have some fun things to do in the garden. And I want to encourage all of you to take a break from the busy season and go outside. It's so important to connect with nature, be mindful, get outside, touch grass, and just take some time for yourself to be in your garden. And hopefully some of these things will give you some ideas of things that you can do in your garden and get yourself prepared for the next season. So I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you all have a chance to get in your garden today. Hey, Bubba, you gotta be in every video, huh? You gotta be in every video. Every time I press record, you come.